well, you use the word chunk quite a lot. And I think most teachers in Russia know what collocation is. Now we're used to this term, yeah. But chunk, for many people, may sound a bit weird or unfamiliar. What's the difference between a chunk and a collocation?
Well, I mean, first of all, I'm glad that teachers in Russian know the word collocation, because let's say maybe 10 years ago, it was still a novelty
We progressed.
Word. Yeah. So, so the word chunk, I mean, yeah, there's sort of an overlap. I would say collocation is a kind of chunk. But there are many, and the chunk, let me define collocation first, because there's sort of different approaches to defining collocations. For example, many corpus linguists would call also things like, take off, look after, all the, what we would call in, our ELT parlance, phrasal verbs or multi-part verbs are also known as collocations, because technically, from the linguistic sort of point of view, they are words that frequently go together with each other, so they are collocations. However, for pedagogical purposes, I would say collocation is a combination of two content words. So that's why, let's say, afraid of, I mean, it could be considered grammatical collocation, but my definition of collocation is more sort of combination of two content words. So it has to be a verb plus noun, let's say, achieve a goal, or an adjective plus noun, like, stunning view, or noun plus noun, or noun alternate, like a cup of tea would be a collocation, but not sort of, adjectives with dependent prepositions like frustrated with or afraid of, etc. And what is a chunk? Well, chunk actually, anything can be a chunk. I know it sounds like, because basically it's not so much, chunk is anything, and in my book I give quite a long definition. We worked quite hard on this definition. It was called Thornbury. There was lots of sort of going back and forth, because we really wanted to capture all the manners of sin, as it were. So I drew mainly on the work of Alison Ray. She's a well-known, she's quite one of the most prominent researchers on formulaic language, and David Wood, who's based in Canada. She's based in the UK. So I try sort of to combine, what they consider as formulaic expression, because that's a term. That's another term just to confuse the audience at this point.
Exactly.
Formulaic expression, multi-word expression. So a chunk, anything can be a chunk as long as it's not what it is, it's how you chunk it. So for example, you can teach I don't know, by combining the rules of grammar. It's present simple, we use do, then we contract it to don't, from do not, and we add the word no, and then we add up with I don't know. But you can also teach simply I don't know as a chunk without going into sort of structural analysis. I don't know, that's what you say. And you can teach, and you see the immediate advantage is you can teach it to beginners who don't know the grammar yet. I mean, they're not able to sort of to manipulate grammar to the point where they can produce I don't know. But if it's...
So before they learn what is a noun, what's the order, word order...
Well, specifically in this case, before they learn the function of do, the auxiliary and not, do not, and they just memorize it, commit it to memory as a chunk, and use it when it needs to be used as a chunk. I don't know.
Okay, and naturally the next question, why is it so important to learn chunks?
Yes,
why
that's a
did you write a whole
question.
book
Yes.
on that?
So research shows that there's lots of research, there's lots of evidence that that's the way L1 users, those for whom English is mother tongue, that's the way they acquire language. So it's not just single words, but lots of items, I would say, are acquired as unanalyzed wholes. So sort of many children hear sort of give me this ball, okay, and they sort of acquire gimme with that it might even sort of seem to them as gimme, without sort of segmenting it into give and me. And this sort of segmentation occurs later on, when they realize that actually it consists of two items: give, me. It's actually a verb followed by a direct object. I'll give you an example from second language acquisition. Many learners, for example, I'm sure with many beginners, you would use the word, the chunk, let's. It's one of the first you would say, let's do this. Yeah, so they are exposed to let's pretty early on, but only later do they actually realize, that it consists of let and us. And actually, just in this workshop that I was giving today, a teacher actually came up to me and said, Leo, also, it occurred to me fairly recently that it's actually let us. So it's the same process. So you learned let as a chunk, and only much later this, segmentation, this, division of this chunk into words occurred.
And so what's then? Should we only learn chunks? And as Stephen Krashen famously said, the language learning will take care of itself. Yeah.
Well, yes, I know it might sound like very controversial, but I would say yes. Basically, that's how I personally would go about learning a foreign language. Like if I wanted to go to Portugal, have you been to Portugal?
No.
I've never been. It's been on my places to go list for like 10 years, maybe more. I've never been to Portugal, but if I wanted to go to Portugal, let's say, and if I wanted to learn some Portuguese, I would start with learning some sort of kind of phrases, like what would we say, can I order something in a restaurant, or I would like something. So this is how I certainly would go about learning a language. I don't think Stephen Krashen actually used the word chunk himself.
No,
but he himself, and there's another famous, I'll reply to Polina's question with another famous quote by Stephen Krashen. I think he said it at a conference once in the 80s. When learners travel, they do not carry grammar books, they carry dictionaries. Or he may have said phrase books. I mean, certainly if he said phrase books, it even supports my argument even better. Because, it's a kind of like learning phrases that you would need in certain situations, like, renting a car, checking into a hotel, ordering food in a restaurant, going to the police, God forbid, you had your wallet stolen or something. So, and there lies also criticism of the lexical approach, which was, you see, I'm laying all my cards on the table, which Michael Swan once described as the phrase, I think he said, it's a phrasebook approach. Like basically just learn lots of it, and learners do not sort of learn real grammar of the language, they just learn lots of phrases or chunks, the term I use.
Okay, so you gave a couple of examples for this elementary beginner level, but what about intermediate and upper intermediate and advanced? So should they go about learning in the same way?
Well, I think it's even more important for, because I think the argument sort of is only, it's suitable for higher levels, and you need to, but actually, it's just as important for higher level learners. I mean, take writing, lots of writing, especially like academic writing, and students when you need to write essays for exam preparation, it's largely very formulaic. There's lots of, the main advantage of is, on all those linking words we use. Another possible solution to the problem is, etc. So it's even more important to learn those prefabricated chunks.
Okay, and to make the bridge to my next question. In 2013, it's 6 years ago now, you wrote an article in The Guardian, which, by the way, I'm going to post the link in the group in a couple of days. And this article was called, Why Has the Lexical Approach Been So Long in Coming? And in this article, you argue that over the last 2 decades, there's been so much research about it, and there's so much evidence that this is actually the way people learn languages. But as for 2019, to my best knowledge, we have only 2 books that employ this lexical approach fully, let's say. It's Outcomes and Innovations by Hugh Dell and Andrew Walkley. And a couple of days ago, they advertised a new course book, Roadmap. But this is it. Why we still have so many course books that take this classical approach, or whatever,
like more traditional grammar.
Traditional grammar.
Well, I mean, I think everybody should make a living. People who promote. So I guess those who promote more, they should also, turn their ideas into. I mean, because they're different approaches. Okay, because it's what it is. It's an approach. So I think I wrote that article just to put it in context, okay? Because it's all about context, So it was the 20th anniversary of the lexical approach in 2013. It was 20 years since, I mean, when I say anniversary,
since the book came out.
The lexical approach, since the book,
the
Michael
book
Lewis,
by Michael
seminal
Lewis.
book came out. And I think the same year well, it was Hugh Dell actually, at his university in Westminster where he used to work, that's where there was this conference held to mark the anniversary. It was the same, so it came out around the same time. I think I published it sort of to promote that conference. By the way, Michael Lewis was very pleased with it, with the article, even though I misquoted it. But then let's leave it to the reader, to the audience to find out if they can find my misquote. I actually made a mistake in the article. But
I read it yesterday, but I don't remember.
Yeah, I just grammar consists of lexicalized grammar and not sorry. So I just it was just a sort of
you mixed it up a bit.
Yeah, typo. But basically, why has it been so long coming now? Well, I guess it's much easier to sort of to package, and sell a course book that's based on discrete grammar items. It sort of lends itself probably more to being packaged and sold.
Let's study present perfect today for past experience.
Oh no! Present. Yeah? You remember new headway, present perfect. You wouldn't see any kind of sign, any appearance of present perfect until unit 6. Until unit 6, because you shouldn't. You're not supposed to expose the learner to something they might not be familiar with.
Okay.
So I remember in my pre-lexical approach days teaching using new headway, intermediate, where present perfect didn't appear until unit 6, and we used to use the book would be used sort of over maybe I'm sure PKC maybe they do the same thing. But the textbook is used for like more than one course to to get more mileage out of a textbook. So once students bought it at the beginning of a course, if they re-registered for this, for the next term for the follow-up course, the same book would be used. So I remember in the school where I was working, it wasn't the British Council, we had to use only the first part of the book, the first 5 or 6 units, to make sure there's no overlap with the teacher who would be teaching, so let's say, the course after, sort of second part of the same level, intermediate, let's say intermediate 2. So, and when students ask me, but Leo, what about that present perfect? I said, no, it will be covered in the next course.
Don't
Unit
even
6.
dare.
Yes. So, but back to Hugh Della's course book, Andrew Walkley's course books. Like Hugh Della he's practically a household name in Russia. Like everybody knows his name. So when I give...
I believe that he has to be granted Russian citizenship pretty quick.
Yeah, like that. I saw that was his name. That guy who was stuck at the airport. You know who I'm talking about. Yeah, I mean, I just can't think of his name.
It was Edward Snowden as
well.
Snowden,
yes. So I think he was stuck at the airport. So he should be granted Russian citizenship. Yeah. And the French actor. Gérard Depardieu. Yeah. So Hugh Della should really join the ranks. Because
for good reasons.
For good reasons. No, I can't say anything because people say, but Hugh Della says, I mean, Hugh and I mean, first of all, we're good friends. We're like lexical buddies, as I refer to, sort of people who support the lexical, in favor of the advocates of the lexical approach, if you like. So we agree 70% of the time, but there are still some things we're not necessarily of the same mind on.
This is one of my next questions.
Next question. So yes, going back to course book, innovation. I think Innovations was a true lexical, even though they did use sort of using grammar. They had those sections called using grammar. It was totally lexical grammar. It wasn't sort of present simple, unit 1 present simple, unit 2 present continuous, or is it past simple? So and then you go to unit 3. So it was called using grammar, but it was really grammar that you wouldn't normally find in textbooks. And my sort of journey into the lexical approach started with that book, with Innovations, before I read the lexical theory. So it started more with practice. So I think Innovations was more lexical, more true lexical approach. Lots of chunks. Each unit would start with sort of chunks. You have to you learner would have learned by the end of the unit. And I think outcomes they had to sort of compromise a bit. I hope Hugh Della is not listening to this, but I think they had to sort of, balance the, yes, we still want to, stick to our guns. There's a nice chunk, by the way. Huh? So adhere to our principles, but at the same time, the market needs and, learners' expectations, they want some grammar, so we have to infuse some grammar into it. I like in outcomes. My favorite, I would say, is the upper intermediate. It's a great book.
Oh,
But I
yeah.
still think
I love it.
Innovations was like true lexical approach.
Okay. So to sum up, you think that it's for more or less for the marketing reasons that it's not so much promoted yet, the lexical approach, I mean. That it's hard, hard to sell.
Again, many textbooks have collocations. I mean, collocation boxes now.
Yeah.
Okay, so at least that that's made its way. Collocations have made their way into mainstream course books. But yes, many course books still follow a grammar syllabus. I mean, yeah, I don't know why. I can't explain. Yeah, probably needs of the like easier to package, easier to sell, learners' expectations, maybe cultural reasons. Maybe in some countries that's what teachers, the learners,
Grammar,
ministries of education, yes,
exercises, freer practice,
yeah,
PPP.
maybe that's what they used to.
Do you think it's going to change somehow?
Well, I think it has changed already. Like with lots of sort of more pages devoted to. Somebody mentioned this book today. Actually, I think it was Cutting Edge. Because I used to use Cutting Edge in the old days. It was the old Cutting Edge. I believe now there's the new Cutting Edge, probably third edition.
It's third edition now. Yeah.
Third edition. So somebody in my workshop today in Moscow mentioned Cutting Edge activity where certain chunks were highlighted in sort of orange. And I was like, oh, it's a great idea, because again, there's research that shows that enhanced input, because that's the term used in second language acquisition research to refer to anything that you do in a text to make certain features of the input more noticeable. So it can be bolding, highlighting, underlining, any kind of typographic enhancement. So it could be like highlighting in that case. So that's what they did. I mean, yeah. So some research is being taken. Maybe it takes time until sort of research seeps through from ivory towers, but it does penetrate sort of the market.